Creating a unique and exciting open world is quite a challenging task. Not only the gaming world needs to be polished and detailed, but it also needs to accommodate the gameplay of the game itself. The setting is an integral part of the game design, and thus when drawing an open world, developers need to think of all the content that is going to be in it. However, some open worlds take thousands of people and multiple years to create, and it feels like a waste to use these worlds only once. Should games reuse the same open worlds more often? Would recycling worlds be a net positive or a net negative? First things first, roll the intro. Many are the gaming franchises that heavily focus on their well-crafted open worlds, from your Far Cry games to your The Witchers, from your Dark Souls to your GTAs. For some titles, their open world is the aspect they want the players to care about the most, being the first selling point highlighted in trailers, demos and showcases. But if open worlds are so important, why are they discarded after being used for only one gaming experience? Ubisoft has spent years to recreate a beautiful and immersive revolutionary Paris for Assassin's Creed Unity, just to forget about it and leave it in what is a fairly controversial game in the franchise. This feels like a huge waste of resources, and this is far from the only example of a game to have an open world never to be reused for a new project. In fact, the great majority of open worlds that I can think of were made only and exclusively for the game they were developed for, which in my opinion feels odd. Why waste so many years of development? On the other hand, however, the uniqueness of an open world can and often is the element that makes a game so valuable. Reusing too much an existing setting could come as an inspired game design and make the games that do share worlds feel less distinctive, unique. While it is very rare, there are examples of newly released games that use the same open worlds to their predecessors, some poorly and some in a positive way. In today's video, I will discuss the broader question, should games reuse the same open worlds, and explain why, in my opinion, while there are some drawbacks, more video games developers should consider reusing older open worlds by upgrading them in meaningful ways, to let players explore the same regions with great improvements. The examples of games that share the same open world as the other games of the same series are not that many, but a bit more than I initially thought when scripting this video. Games like Yakuza 0, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, Wii Sports Resort, Spider-Man 2, Assassin's Creed Rogue, Far Cry Primal all have open worlds previously seen in other games at least once, sometimes even between different generations of consoles. These games are great and I will address them soon enough, but before diving into the discussion more in depth, I must bring to the table the best example I have on my list, the one that inspired me to write this video. I'm of course talking about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. When the sequel was announced, many, myself included, were skeptical regarding the decision producer Eiji Aonuma took in regards to the game's setting, being the same Hyrule already explored in Breath of the Wild. Not only it is quite rare for a Zelda sequel to share the same engine and to be released on the same console as its prequel, but it is even rarer for both to share the same open world. Breath of the Wild's Hyrule was a pioneer of a new open world philosophy many modern games learn from, non-linear exploration. Most open worlds before were of course non-linear by definition, but quests follow a strict linear path, and enemy levels discourage players to explore too much too quickly. Breath of the Wild was the first modern mainstream game to change all that in a revolutionary and outstanding way. But how did the sequel utilize the same overworld? Did such a revolution in the game design work a second time? The short answer is yes, and the long answer is splendidly. What Tears of the Kingdom did was not only to use the same open world as Breath of the Wild, but to reinvent it and to expand it, enhancing what was considered by many unimprovable. I cannot go over every single detail, big or small, that was changed, but in short, every area previously explored had something new, something that made it interesting and exciting to rediscover. Sure, the base geography was kept roughly the same cities, same mountains, same rivers, but the elements within the world were changed in a meaningful way, so much so that at times I even forget this to be the same Hyrule as before. Remixing rather than to scrapping the previous Hyrule permitted developers not only to make a proper direct sequel to a Zelda game, something that as I stated is quite rare, but let them focus more on how to make their world better, to start from an already detailed and painted canvas rather than to start from scratch. And this brings me to the first point I want to make. Reusing open worlds, less developers focus more on improvements and care for details. If developers are forced to make a new world each and every time they develop a new game, it is inevitable that many resources will be diverted into making the base world rather than to focus on the little things. We as players always complain where worlds are void, when the lands we explore are empty and lack purpose to explore them. These are rightful complaints, but rather than to always expect new worlds in our games, it would be rational to ask developers to somehow reuse older worlds, to enhance them just like Nintendo did for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, so that they can focus more on the details we ask for. Imagine a game like Just Cause that rather than to focus on volume, it focuses on quality. Maybe Avalanche Studios develops a new game set in the same Medici Island seen in Just Cause 3, enhancing each corner with new towns, landmarks and tons of smaller details. It would be awesome to see even a totally different game like an RPG set in the islands of Solis, reaching different environments and locations to explore and above all, expand upon. You might think that repurposing a map for one type of video game to another one is unheard of, but I do remind you that Wii Sports Woohoo Island was taken basically as it is and made into a Mario Kart track, more specifically 2 of them, both in Mario Kart 7 for the Nintendo 3DS. Another reason why I believe reusing older open worlds is a good idea is because it creates attachment. It makes the world itself become the protagonist of the series it's in. The second gaming franchise that inspired me to make this video that is the perfect example to explain this point is Yakuza, where virtually all games of the series are set in the Tokyo district of Kamurocho. From the first game released in 25 to the future games yet to be released, Kamurocho remained fairly unchanged, a small yet extremely dense open world where every street has a name and many are the buildings containing activities for the player to do, from minigames like bowling to full-on side stories. At first, setting 10 and more games in the same few avenues may sound like a recipe for disaster and monotony, yet fans of the series like myself feel the opposite. It is always a joy to end up in Kamurocho and to see the changes it got over the years, expanding ever so more the district. All games of the series do have multiple side cities often unique to each game's narration. Think of Yakuza 3's Ryoku in Okinawa or Yakuza 6 Onomichi in Hiroshima, but they all do include the legendary beloved Kamurocho as a way to tie every game together. While the other cities serve the purpose to keep the player excited to explore a new place, Kamurocho serves the purpose to keep players attached to the main storyline of the franchise. Kamurocho is such an iconic world because it appears and it is remade in various games developed by Sega, mainly Yakuza and Like a Dragon, but also Judgment. There is a sense of reassurance and familiarity when starting up a new game and knowing where to go, knowing how the city works, knowing the lore of the town, knowing Kamurocho like you know your neighborhood. The relation between the player and the world is real, built upon decades of wonderful games. Such connection cannot be achieved if every time the player is transported into a new location. Don't get me wrong, exploring new areas is great, and I do love the other cities, but to bond to a world, the player has to spend more games in it, for them to be able to call the digital realm a second home. And these two advantages described in Zelda and Yakuza are not mutually exclusive, quite the opposite in fact, they often go hand in hand. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 for instance are good examples of how developers save time reusing the region of Unova, increasing the lore and the world building, and making players more attached to the new generations of games. When the first titles released all the way back in 2010, they were received with mixed feelings. The quality of the games was high and pushed the Nintendo DS hardware quite a lot, more than what people gave it credit to, but the region of Unova itself felt too different from the ones that came before, a style many fans did not appreciate. Rather than to just release a definitive edition of the game like Platinum was for Diamond and Pearl, or abandon the region altogether like it happened to Kalos from Pokemon X and Y, Game Freak doubled down on Unova and released a sequel set in the same region, something that never happened before in the mainline franchise excluding the remakes. This proved to be a brilliant move. Game Freak got to make 2 new games quicker than usual and fans started to appreciate Unova more the second time around, since the world building expanded noticeably and the original games no longer felt too distinct from the rest. While these 3 examples demonstrate that setting a game in the same open world can work to both the developers and to the player's advantage, I do need to stretch out the fact that doing so can bring some risk. When players found out that Far Cry Primal map's space geography was based on Far Cry 4, there were players who felt robbed, leaving a bad mark on the title. There are players that really value the experience of exploring an uncharted land, a world they have never seen before, making recycling open worlds by definition a bad idea. If you are one of these people, I can understand your concerns, but trust me that the advantages for reusing an open world are many and can still lead to awesome games like the 3 cited in the video. It may be an unpopular idea to propose, but I do invite developers to improve their open worlds for upcoming games rather than to always doing them from scratch. In my opinion, video games should reuse the same open worlds more often, because as seen in Zelda, Yakuza and Pokemon, it can work splendidly. I believe that the advantages of repurposing a world are many, from expanding the lore and the quality of the open world to create a strong sense of attachment. Rather than to wish for more worlds poorly made, I believe it makes more sense to have fewer but ever expanding and developing open worlds. There are some negatives for taking this approach. If badly done, players might complain that they are paying for playing the same game. If done well, however, as we saw in the examples brought, then this may be an actual feasible way to both alleviate work for developers and give players more fun adventures in the worlds we already adore. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many worlds times for watching today's video. As you can probably tell by the various videos I make on the topic, I do enjoy exploring and studying the design of worlds in games, and I always find fascinating the idea of modular open worlds that could give multiple game experiences. What worlds do you think need a second chance? Let me know down in the comments below. I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci!